We'll start at the Emirates where Arsenal drew 1-1 with Man City. Mark, you were there. A lot of questions about Mikel Arteta's approach before kick-off about the team he picked. What did you think? Do you think he was too negative or do you think it's been a bit of an overreaction?
I think it's been a bit of an overreaction, to be honest. I think we can all be clever with hindsight, can't we? But, Bukayo Saka, for instance, didn't start because he hasn't been playing recently. He wasn't fit to start. And I think, why would he start him in the biggest game of the season, I guess, to date? Because having lost at Anfield, this was the biggest Arsenal face now. So he had to be pragmatic about it. And he's still not got any Martin Odegaard because Odegaard isn't fit. So I think he had to pick the team that he had in front of him. And obviously, Madueka's had a great start to the season. You can't knock that selection. Trossard was the unusual one, was the surprise one. But for me, Arsenal still had the players to win the game. I just think that, Pep had a game plan. Pep Guardiola had a game plan and it worked. And obviously City scoring first made it much easier for that game plan to work. If you've got the pace of Haaland and Doku on the counter-attack, exploit it. So, yeah, I think there's been a bit of an overreaction. I think it was the same case when Arsenal went to Liverpool and lost to a wonder goal from Dominic Szoboszlai. In that game, they pretty much deserved to get a draw, but it's just the fine margins. So, but the flip side is, they played the two biggest rivals for the title now and haven't beaten either of them. So I guess that is something you can hold against Arteta in the sense that the best coaches in the world have got a gambling streak in them. When they need to get a result, they'll go for broke, won't they, rather than be a bit more cautious. And Arteta still may be a little bit on the cautious side.
Do you think that the reaction would have been the same had there not been a similar reaction after the Liverpool game? Because he got accused at Anfield of not really coming to play. I suppose some Arsenal fans will have looked at the team before kickoff and seen that maybe Eze's not in there and thought, you've kind of done it again. Because it's happened twice in kind of quick succession, do you think that that's kind of added to this narrative around Arteta now?
Yeah, potentially, because, they spent so much money this summer, haven't they? And I guess they are out of excuses now. Mikel Arteta is out of excuses that everything that he's wanted, he's got. He's got the centre forward in Victor Gyökeres, who was pretty quiet against City. So there are no real flaws in the team, but I'll go back to Odegaard again. Odegaard barely played at Anfield. He played late in the game as a substitute. So Arsenal really miss him. They really miss his creativity through the middle. And I think when he doesn't play, they can only go out wide and teams don't know how to stop that. So Arteta's built a squad that's got a replacement or cover for every player in the squad apart from Martin Odegaard. But, we don't like to talk about players that aren't playing, that aren't available, because you have to focus on those that are on the pitch. But he's a big loss for Arsenal. He does make a big difference. And I think what Arteta did yesterday, he had the best squad at his disposal. And I think they did okay. They could have won the game, but it was just, like I say, we're in the business of kind of scrutinising and trying to, break down straight after the game what's gone wrong. And I just think there was a bit of an overreaction on Arteta. I think, they still got a decent point out of a game against Man City and they could have won the game, really.
City and Pep have obviously been scrutinised as well. You mentioned there that it looked an awful lot like he came to play on the break. Obviously, they scored a goal through Haaland on the break. Towards the end, he seemed to kind of go more and more defensive, perhaps more defensive than we've seen him do in the past. I mean, when I was watching that game, I was reminded of that Feyenoord game last year, right in the middle of their bad run where I think they were 3-0 up. And usually when City teams have a lead, you see kind of Pep trying to defend by just keeping the ball. You just keep the ball and the other team won't get near it and you would run out and win 3-0 and the game would be over. Obviously, that Feyenoord game, that didn't happen. For the first time ever, they looked really, really vulnerable in that sort of situation. And Feyenoord pegged them back and in the end drew 3-0. When I was watching that Arsenal game yesterday, it was almost like he was still scarred from that a little bit. And instead of trusting his players just to say, look, we're 1-0 up, we've only got 20, 15 minutes to play, we're going to just keep the ball and not let Arsenal get it. Instead of doing that, he went to kind of this ultra defensive mode and threw on a load of extra defenders, took Haaland off, although I think he said afterwards that Haaland had sort of said, I'm struggling and I need to come off, but chucked on a load of defenders and tried to win the game in a purely defensive way rather than in that kind of Pep offensive way that we've seen in the past with City players just kind of keeping the ball and not letting Arsenal play. Were you surprised at all at how Pep and City approached those last sort of 20 minutes? Do you think that it's fine to defend like that in a situation like that, or have you got a slightly different view?
No, I think it's totally fine. I actually love the way that Pep Guardiola's gone about it. I think, it won't be the podcast if we didn't talk about Ruben Amorim. We're talking about one coach in Amorim who is completely wedded to one way of playing. Now, Pep Guardiola's no doubt the best coach in the last 20 years, if not beyond. And he's given us so many different styles. The way that they're playing this season, City, is totally different to the Barcelona team that he had, and certainly the first generation of a City team that he had. So, Pep has really evolved, and he's moved with the times. And you'll have seen this as well, because you watch City more than I do, I guess. But I was quite close to the pitch at the Emirates yesterday. And one thing you see about the City team is the one he picked yesterday, they're all, apart from Bernardo Silva, they're all huge. Nico O'Reilly must be, 6'4". Donnarumma, 6'5". Even Kuzhinov looks like he's gone away for 3 or 4 months and really bulked up. They're a very big, imposing side now, Man City. Obviously, Haaland up front, 6'4", 6'5". So Pep has kind of evolved the game, knowing that, especially against Arsenal, it's a team that will always try and beat you with set pieces and, being physical at corners they're renowned for it. So Pep has realised the game's changing. The game is now becoming, as Thomas Tuchel said, about long throws and, long balls and cross into the box. So Pep Guardiola, if he maintained his reputation as being a tiki-taka coach, passing it around and using, little ball players as he used to have at Barcelona with Xavi, Iniesta, and Messi, that wasn't going to work in the modern game. So he's changed his approach to work to it. And that for me, is why he brought in Donnarumma. Donnarumma's presence in the box yesterday basically nullified Arsenal's threat from corners. But obviously, late in the game, Martinelli scores that goal where he catches Donnarumma off his line. But that wasn't down to his physical presence. Donnarumma's made a big difference with his physique in a team that has, over recent windows, become much more physical and powerful.
It's interesting that the last season, Pep, at one stage in one of his press conferences, said that he thought that the Premier League was kind of moving away from his sort of tactics, that kind of positional setup that he's had when he first joined City. And he was praising the likes of Brentford and Brighton and Newcastle for this kind of like really quick, transitional, direct, I suppose at times, football. And there is a school of thought that he's kind of seen the way the Premier League is moving and hired Pep Linders because of that, because he still likes his team to have the control. And he said in the past in a news conference that he'll always love 1,000 million passes, but he has admired a lot of what Liverpool did under Jurgen Klopp and Pep Linders, and the way that they were able to win the ball back very quickly and then attack very, very quickly. And that he's seen in his City team that there's room for kind of improvement in that area. And he's almost like he's trying to merge the best parts of his great City teams with the best parts of that Liverpool team under Klopp. And we saw yesterday how quickly they attacked for that goal, and the one that Haaland scores with Reinders, and then Haaland, sort of racing half the length of the pitch and scoring on the break. I mean, do you see that City again are kind of changing and moulding and adapting, and perhaps this kind of, this City team that we saw that would just be camped outside the boxes of everyone and just pass until there was an opening and a goal? Just you see City kind of moving away from that into a more kind of direct, quick, I suppose it's, heavy metal football kind of team.
Yeah, it's more athletic, I guess. But I mean, that goal he scored at Arsenal was a classic Liverpool goal of Jurgen Klopp, wasn't it? It was, you could basically, if that was Mo Salah playing rather than Haaland, you wouldn't be surprised at the rapid breakaway. I think it was always in Haaland is kind of evolution as well, because it was only 18 months ago that Roy Keane said he was a League Two player, didn't bring anything to the table apart from his goals. Well, that goal he scored at the Emirates was, he started the move. He won the ball in the centre circle in his own half, led it off to Reinders and sprinted forward, and Reinders obviously spotted the run. But what was interesting in that as well, just going off at a tangent, was how Gabriel, his marker, just jogged back and completely left Haaland to escape him. So that was a real Linders kind of goal, that, in the sense that rapid counter-attack, and the work that he's been doing on the training ground is basically based around, learning to counter-attack like Liverpool did. And the City players are learning a new way of playing. But yeah, like I said, all credit to Pep for spotting the changing trends and being big enough and clever enough to move with the times. There's nothing worse than a coach, no names mentioned again, who only sticks to one way of playing. Pep has shown he's gone from one extreme to the other, and he's mastered both.
Well, just one last question on these two teams. Then obviously Liverpool have won 5 from 5 and are right at the top of the Premier League. Did you see a genuine title contender in either Arsenal and City? And if so, which one is the more likely to challenge Liverpool?
Well, I went to the game thinking that Arsenal would win quite easily, so that shows how right I was. But I think Arsenal have got the credentials. I think they do need Odegaard fit, and Odegaard's probably doesn't stay fit long enough. But I think with him fit all the way through and Saka fit, I think Arsenal have still got a great chance of winning the league. But City surprised me yesterday. I thought that City have now got something back. They're not the free-flowing team that they used to be. I think they've got fewer individual star players. But when they play Liverpool at the Etihad, I think in beginning of November, that'll be a really interesting game, because if by then City will be much more comfortable in playing this new way under Pep, they've got the physique, they've got the pace, they've got the players fit, then they can they can actually beat Liverpool. And I think what City have got is that ability to go the course and distance. They've done it before so many times. Yes, it's a changing squad, but Guardiola and a lot of the players know what it's like and what it takes to win the title. So if they can beat Liverpool, it'll be a laying a marker down and showing that they're not going to win. They had a bad season last year, but they're still around. And I think City can win the league. I think if they've got a chance of winning it when they get to January, if they're still in with a shout, you'll probably see them go again in the transfer market and add somebody else to the squad. So I think City are definitely a contender, but I still think Arsenal have got the edge in terms of quality. But I think City got the edge in terms of experience and know-how.
Well, next we'll go to Old Trafford, where Man United got a much-needed 2-1 win over Chelsea. Mark, we were both there at Old Trafford, rain-soaked Old Trafford on Saturday night. Obviously, quite a chaotic game with everything that happened with the red cards and things like that. But do you think United deserved it in the end?
They deserved the win, yeah. I think they started the game really well and scored early, which they haven't done enough recently. And then obviously the game was all over the place because of the red card that Chelsea had early on with Robert Sanchez. It changed again when Casemiro was sent off. And that seemed to knock United back. So it's really hard to judge United in that game because had they won the game 11 versus 10, then we'd have all said, well, they've only beaten 10 men, so what are they really like? Second half comes around, it's 10 versus 10, and it doesn't really give you an accurate picture. So all that came out of it for me from a positive perspective was that they've won the game. They've won the game, they've got 3 points, the crisis has subsided. It's not over, it's subsided, but I guess we have to see where they are after the Brentford game and the Sunderland game before the international break, because if they win those 2 games, then all of a sudden we'll be talking about Man United in the race for the top 4 and everything's fine. Amorim's system started to work, but I mean, we haven't seen Amorim do back-to-back wins, I think, since the very first weeks of his career as United manager. So that's the big question there. Can they sustain it? Obviously, Casemiro will be suspended at Brentford at the weekend. So there are a lot of questions to answer still with United, but the win is the win, isn't it? And I guess, you cover United every day, Rob. I guess that, from your perspective, is the fact that they've won the game and it is a case of a bit of calmness can return to Old Trafford for a week at least.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it just buys Amorim some breathing space, because another defeat, after what had happened at the derby, would have just, seen it descend into even more sort of chaotic week with the speculation around his future heading into that Brentford game. So I think, sat in the post-match press conference, he did look like quite a relieved man. Actually, Luke Shaw spoke in the mix zone afterwards, and the first thing he said was, the main feeling is relief. And I think that goes through the whole club, really, because we've been through this situation so many times before with different managers that, when momentum starts building against you with defeat after defeat after defeat, really these wins are really much needed, particularly for the manager and the players, just to kind of give them a break from everything, all the noise that's going on around the club. In terms of Chelsea, Mark, they were obviously massively affected by Robert Sanchez's really early red card. Maresca, I think, has got a little bit of stick for how he handled that. He brought 2 of his attacking players off, and there was quite a major reshuffle. Do you think that Maresca helped Amorim with the way that he did reshuffle after that red card? Do you think that they kind of played into their hands a little bit with that?
No, I don't actually. I think that it was just unlucky that Cole Palmer went off 10 minutes later with a groin strain. I think, I've never seen a manager do 2 substitutions following a red card, but you could see what he was trying to do. I think what he was planning to do was, knowing that United have been really kind of low on confidence, really, I think he felt he could smother the game, suffocate the game, I guess, and really, really frustrate United, get the crowd on the backs, get them nervous, and then hit them on the counter-attack with João Pedro and Cole Palmer. But obviously, Palmer went off, and that meant that the plan went out the window. But I can see what he was thinking, because we know that United are quite fragile, and if Chelsea had scored before they did, or if they frustrated the crowd, it would have got really, really negative inside Old Trafford. But that plan, if it was the plan, went out the window when Cole Palmer went off on 20 minutes. So having to use 3 subs in the first half meant that they were really light on options. But Chelsea still, they clung on long enough, and they had enough threat. I think, Reece James was probably the best player on the pitch for them. I think João Pedro looked sharp. They could have hurt United. It was just a strange game because of the weather, the red cards, and the whole mood of the game. But no, I think Chelsea have been a little bit harsh to criticise. I think Maresca has as well. I think he tried to do something different, but it didn't quite pay off because of circumstances later on. But one thing I want to ask you, Rob, there's 2 things that struck me. First of all, about the selection was from Amorim was the goalkeeper. He stuck with Bayindir, and very late in the game, Bayindir spilled a cross which could have led to a Chelsea equaliser. And then he he took Harry Maguire off late in the game, and he's got this thing about taking centre halves off, midway through the second half. Now, I can't imagine Virgil van Dijk or Ruben Dias or William Saliba being substituted by their manager. So why on earth is he changing his centre halves? And also, when's he going to put Sonny Lamans in goal?
Yeah, I mean, the goalkeeping situation is interesting at United now, because in my mind they've got 3 number 2s now in Bayindir, Lamans, and Tom Heaton. I accepted what Amorim said about Lamans and the Manchester derby, that it was a massive game, high pressure, a couple of days after he joined from Royal Antwerp, but not sticking him in for Chelsea suggests to me now that in his head Bayindir is his number 1. Now, he was asked that exact question in his press conference ahead of the game on Friday. He said, is Bayindir now your number 1? And he says no. Every player's got to fight for their position every single week. Now, he kind of has to say that because he needs to keep the rest of the squad interested. But it just, the sense that I get is that Lamans is a young goalkeeper with United think is a lot of potential, but just isn't quite ready after just one season in the Belgian Pro League to play as a Premier League number 1. And while he's getting up to speed, they've got to pick Bayindir now, because obviously Andre Nana has gone on loan to Turkey. I think Bayindir is a worry, and you saw right at the end of that game against Chelsea why he is a worry, because he didn't really have very much to do, couldn't do anything about the goal that Chelsea scored really, but in stoppage time a ball gets whipped in from the right hand side, and with all due respect, a really good goalkeeper under that pressure will just come out and catch the ball and take the pressure off his team. And he didn't. He kind of punched it back into the penalty area and caused a scramble. And luckily for United, they were able to get it clear. I think that there may be issues with Bayindir moving forward. And then the only alternative right now is Sonny Lamans, who clearly, judging by how United have treated him, isn't really ready to be a number 1 in England. So I think it's a difficult situation for Amorim now. I don't necessarily think that he envisaged this being his goalkeeping situation at this stage of the season. I think it's just something he's got to deal with now, an extra problem that he doesn't really need. In terms of the centre halves, I mean, that I can understand why a lot of United fans don't like that the switching of centre halves, and he has done it quite a lot, Ruben Amorim, and a lot of United fans have pointed it out in the past. In Amorim's defence, I genuinely think that this is to do with the load of the players, that he is petrified of overplaying players and causing injuries.
Play once a week.
Well, no, but Harry Maguire's not played, has he? He's not played. He can't possibly be match fit. So he's thrown into a game against Chelsea where it's quite intense. The weather's not helping. He plays 70 odd minutes instead of Lenny Yoro, and at 70 minutes, we've seen in the past that different times tick by, whether it's 60 minutes, 70 minutes, or a little bit later. And Amorim, regardless of the score or the situation of the game, will take a player off. And he's in his head, particularly last season, some people around United were saying that in his head, he's just thinking, I've been told he can only play 70 minutes by the medical staff. I need to get him off because I want to play him next week. I don't want to lose him for 6 weeks. And you have to remember that the season he came in last season, the one before it, was absolutely decimated with injuries under Erik ten Hag. It basically ruined the entire campaign. And I'm pretty sure that Amorim has been told that what happened under Ten Hag and maybe some of the kind of mistakes that were made with Eric and how he used players and pushed players. And Amorim has decided, even last season, that he's just not going to push players past what they would call their red zone. So the minute he's told by the medical staff, this player is in danger of getting an injury, he's allowed to play 60 minutes, and regardless of whether a score is 3-0, 1-1, 2-1, whatever it is, he's going to take him off. And I genuinely think that's what he did with Harry Maguire on Saturday. And I can understand why United fans in particular look at that and think, I don't really like that, because you're making unnecessary changes. You kind of making the team panic when you don't really need to. But in Amorim's mind, he needs to keep his best players fit. And he would much rather take Harry Maguire off after 70 minutes and then have him again available to start against Brentford on Saturday than pushing for another 30 minutes and maybe losing for 2 or 3 weeks in a situation you just can't afford to lose his best players.
Just on Bayindir, I think it's worth reminding people that he was signed by United 2 years ago in the summer window because he was basically cheap and he was available. It was a deadline day, or very close to the deadline day move. £4 million from Fenerbahce. Not really a goalkeeper with any great pedigree, but United had Jack Butland in the number 2 role the season prior to that. He was left on a free agency, went to Rangers, so they were desperate for a number 2 at the start of the season. So they got a guy who was, not that good, and he was a number 2 last season. Didn't play very well when he came in. Saved a couple of penalties in a shootout. against Arsenal, which seems to have got into Ruben Amorim's head that it makes him a great goalkeeper. But you're right, he's a number 2. And I think, he's by far the worst current number 1 in the Premier League. I think we've said this before, but I think Lamans, obviously needs to bed in. He needs to get used to the club league, used to the Premier League, used to the ball that they use, because we know that some clubs have blamed the ball in recent weeks. But I think, with Brentford away and Sunderland at home, and then it's Liverpool after the international break, you can't risk putting Senny Lamans in at Anfield for his debut. He has to play against Brentford or Sunderland. I think the slip or it was a slip. It slipped out of his hands in the last minute against Chelsea in the later stages. That for me, that's Bayindir's reason to be dropped, because it was another mistake which could have led to a goal. And I think the weekend is the perfect chance to bring him in. He's got to play him sometimes, Lamans. He's got to play him at Brentford or against Sunderland. So, but one question I would ask, and then it's not one you can answer, I guess, but what is the goalkeeper coach doing? George Vital is the guy that famously Ruben Amorim said that he would rather him play ahead of Marcus Rashford at 63, but he's not doing much to the goalkeepers, is he? He's had Andre Onana went backwards last season. Bayindir is not very good. Tom Heaton is a good, steady goalkeeper that never plays. So, United have had over the years quite a few goalkeeper coaches, but I'd love to know what this current guy's doing.
Well, and he's got his hands full at the moment, because he's probably thinking, where's my number 1? His goalkeeping coach is only as good as the goalkeepers he's looking after. And I imagine, as I said before, Ruben Amorim, he'll never say it. And it was interesting after one of the news conferences we had recently, right at the end, he was asked about, I think it was Kobe Mainu, and he turned around and he said, I am always going to tell you that I love my players. Always, always, always. And it was as if he was sort of saying, I'm always going to tell you that, even if I don't love them, behind closed doors, that even if I feel a different way, kind of when I'm sat in my office, I'm just never, ever going to tell you that. And I get the sense that maybe he's having that kind of feeling around his goalkeepers, because he would never, I don't think that the plan was ever to have Altay Bayindir as his number 1 for this season. And as I say, it certainly looks right now like that's what's going to happen, because, you mentioned there about Senna Lamans and when does he get put in? Well, when does he get put in? Because there's not really an opportune moment now. There isn't, a Europa League game to stick him in where United are probably going to win anyway, regardless of the team they pick, or, a Carabao Cup game because they've been knocked out. There aren't going to be these games, these kind of breathing space games anymore with this season. It's going to be Premier League game after league game after league game. And you might look at the Brentford game and think, well, it's a perfect opportunity to stick Lamans in to give him a little bit of a taste. Brentford, if they got wind of that, would look at that and go, this is fantastic. A young kid coming from Belgium to make his debut at Brentford on a Saturday morning when he probably doesn't want to be there. They'll be absolutely licking their lips. There is no great time for Senna Lamans to come in. And I think that means that Bayindir will probably carry on until he makes an absolute howler, which, judging by his performance at the end of the game against Chelsea, could be any moment.
I think Brentford would prefer Bayindir to be in goal, to be honest. I think,
I think so.
Bayindir over everybody, let's be honest. But anyway, after the break, we're going to chat to Nader Manu about the pain and the difficulty of being left out of the squad and being forced to train on his own, like Raheem Sterling has been at Chelsea.